In this video, we're going to continue the trend, taking a Pokemon that was really good in Generation 1, and since then has not been very good. Today, I'm beating Pokemon Fire Red using the Persian-line. Starting as a Meowth, I have to work with some bad base stats. 40 HP, special attack and special defense, 45 attack, 35 defense, and 90 speed. It's essentially a fast Pokemon that's not good at anything else. These are the rules for my solo challenges. Also, in Fire Red, I always start with a hardy nature, and I do have the ability Pick Up today, which is normally banned in these challenges, but whenever my solo Pokemon has it, I will allow it to be used. That said, when Meowth evolves into Persian, it loses this ability, so we aren't going to be able to leverage it for very long. After all, Meowth evolves only at level 28. We start with Scratch and Growl, and then through level up, we luckily get Bite at level 10, which is a Dark-type move and deals special damage in Generation 1, so it is going to give us a solution to Brock. I don't think we'll need to level up significantly higher than that. Maybe in the worst case scenario, Meowth's going to need 13 to 15. I only had to fight a couple wild Pokemon south of Pewter City to get to level 10. I decided to fight the camper inside the gym just to see how much damage Bite would be doing against a Geodude, and in this case, I'm able to 3-hit. I'm feeling fairly comfortable in battling Brock. With the upside of flinches, I think Meowth might be able to get this done. Let's see how it goes. Geodude is first. I'm going to leverage Growl here to lower its attack stat so that I'm taking less damage per hit. The Geodude also likes to go for Defense Curl, which is literally just wasting time. And Meowth is also able to 3-hit here. So I move on to the Onix. This time, I'm also going to be going for Growl. It misses Rock Tomb. Then on the next turn, it hits, so now Onix is going to be moving first. But its moves aren't very good, and Bite's doing a lot of damage, so Meowth pulls through with an easy victory over the first gym leader, and earns itself a 10% boost to its attack stat. So far so good. This challenge is looking up for the cute little cat. By the way, my perspective on Meowth has dramatically changed over the course of this channel's lifetime. When I first made my initial Meowth video in Pokemon Yellow, I really ripped into this Pokemon, and a lot of people told me that they didn't see eye to eye with me in the comments. Since all of that, I have become a cat dad to 3 wonderful cats. This is Churro, this is Rosie, and this is Momo. Of the 3, I think Momo is definitely the most Meowth coated, at least in coloration. So needless to say, I am now a fan of cats, and because of that, there's definitely a special place in my heart for Meowth, even though it isn't one of my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon. Although, I do quite like Persian, because when I played it in Pokemon Yellow, it was so satisfying critting just all the time with Slash. That said, in this game, the critical hit mechanics have changed, so we will no longer be able to get crits on every turn when using the high crit ratio move. Outside of Mount Moon, I pick up the Person Berry, which is useful for Misty, who's just around the corner. Then, inside Mount Moon, I try to do some training against Super Nerd Joven. This doesn't go well, and Meowth almost blacks out. With its tail between its legs, I head back to the Pokemon Center and heal up before proceeding through the rest of this area, fighting less trainers this time around. Now, one thing to note, when you skip training in Mount Moon, you have to jump over the little ledge heading into Cerulean City, and then you cannot go back and get the trainer boosted experience from the earlier portions of the game, until you get access to Vermilion City. Then you could use Diglett's tunnel to go all the way back, but you still can't cut the tree by Pewter City. So the only way to get back to Mount Moon from this point in the game is to defeat Misty and gain access to Cut outside of battle. Well, technically I could just black out right now before using a Pokemon Center, but that's not what I do. I heal up in Cerulean City, purchase myself some items in the mart, and then I decided to face the rival. Meowth is level 16, his lead is Pidgeotto. I can't learn Rock Tomb, so I have to be going for Scratch here, and it is doing pathetic damage. That looks like it's going to be a 6-hit or maybe a 5-hit. After my second turn of damage, I think it is going to be a 5-hit, but Meowth is taking too much from the Pidgeotto's attacks. As a result, I faint before knocking out the rival's lead. This is kind of a strange moment for me. Ordinarily, normal types would have to overlevel in order to beat Brock, but this time with Meowth and having access to Bite, I didn't have to do that. And now, skipping the training in Mount Moon, I'm in a really bad position where I can't fight the rival because his Pidgeotto is too strong. The only available experience to me is inside Misty's gym. But fighting the 2 people here does not provide that much. I get close to level 18, but not quite there. My strategy here was to deposit my Pokemon because maybe I can blackout train against Misty's Staryu to gain experience so that I'll be more prepared for the rival. So how much damage is Bite going to do to Staryu? And the answer is very little. Like, it's going to 4 or 5 hit. Also, Misty's lead knows Recover in Fire Red, unlike in Generation 1, so it can just continuously heal itself and knock out Meowth. I can't even Blackout Train here. That's really awful. So hindsight is 2020. I should have fought every single trainer in the early game to make the rival as easy as possible. Then I wouldn't be in this awful situation. If Meowth was level 20 or 23, it would have a much easier time over more damage rounding thresholds. For now, I train against some wild Pokemon, and then I come back to fight the rival at level 18. This is still not an ideal circumstance. I have Payday now, but it does the same damage that Scratch would. The only benefit here is that if I win, I'll pick up some extra money. I'm able to make it by the Pidgeotto for the first time, but then the Rattata stops Meowth dead in its tracks. So what I'm gonna do is Blackout over and over again, knocking out hopefully the Pidgeotto in every battle, but that doesn't happen in the second fight, so sometimes I just Blackout here without earning anything. The reason I'm not resetting is because I don't want to save in front of the rival on each separate iteration. That's going to stack up and waste a lot of time, when I think in most cases I should be able to defeat the Pidgeotto. Next time I do, but the Rattata once again gets me. This is a really bad scenario. I am definitely regretting not doing the Mount Moon training, and part of me did consider restarting the entire run and just playing the early game back until here to give Meowth a better playthrough result. That said, in my first playthroughs after I get by Brock, I really don't like to restart. Part of these challenges that I really enjoy is having to figure out the game as I go. I don't do a ton of planning beforehand. I kind of look over the move pool quickly and then just go into the run and see what I can do. The fairest thing to do here is continue playing, because every other Pokemon ranked in my tier list was played under these conditions. So that's what I decided to do, and I blacked out so many times to the rival. This was incredibly frustrating. By the time Meowth had reached level 20, it now has 10 faults in total in this run, which is just terrible for the early game. I'm now able to defeat the first 3 Pokemon on the rivals team, but the Bulbasaur is getting me. I thought maybe going back to Misty would give me a victory against her now, since I do more damage. I can defeat the Staryu, but the Starmie is getting me now. And since the rival is giving more experience because it can defeat 3 of his Pokemon, training against him and blocking out there is just more efficient. So Bulbasaur defeats me over and over and over and over and over again. This was truly awful. I now have a total of 17 faults. You know what it takes to beat the rival? Well, it takes some really good flinch luck with Bite against the Bulbasaur, or the Bulbasaur missing Sleep Powder. I don't get that in this fight. I get the other option, which is I can wake up from sleep very early on, land one more Payday, and then the Grass type finally goes down. On Route 24, I level up to 25, where I have a chance to learn Feint Attack. This move and Bite are essentially the same, other than their secondary effects, and I like to have access to both if I can, so I teach Feint Attack in the place of Growl. By the way, this move would have been fantastic against the rival, so the Pidgeotto couldn't mess me up with Sand Attack. But it just comes a little bit too late. Even if I had done all the early game training, I wouldn't be a high enough level to get it before him. The mandatory hiker blocking the elixir is a little bit scary because he has a Machop which knows both low kick and karate chop. In this case though, I can two-shot the fighting type, so he ends up not being an issue. At long last, we're gonna get a moveset upgrade. I have to battle this hiker and then the camper to move him out of position so that I can grab the TM for Secret Power, which is a normal type move with an effective power of 105. Also notably, Pickup allowed us to grab the TM for Hidden Power. Now in my first playthroughs of games, other than Emerald version, my rules are all over the place for all these series, but in most of them, in first playthroughs, I am not allowing myself to use Hidden Power because it over-trivializes a lot of the portions of the game. In Fire Red, things are a little bit more complicated because the only way you can gain access to this TM is through the ability Pickup. That said, I still don't want to use it in first playthroughs, so today, even though I did pick it up, I'm not going to be making use of it. And that's why Hidden Power is a dark type move, simply because I want to give Meowth and Persian perfect stats. Okay, so let's talk TM and HM learn set now that I'm heading back to Cerulean City. In this case, for Meowth, there are some major differences when compared with Generation 1. We still have water and electric type moves for some reason, which doesn't make a ton of sense. Like, how does Meowth use Thunderbolt? Is it static electricity from her fur? I don't really know. But we get the additional moves Dig, Shadow Ball, and Aerial Ace, which are really nice coverage. And as you've already seen, we get a bunch of dark type moves. Those are almost like foreshadowing for the Alolan versions of both Meowth and Persian, which I personally don't really care for. Let me know in the comments if you'd like the regional variants of Meowth. I don't think many of you will. Anyways, coming back to the new TMs that I can learn, Dig is one of them. And in Generation 1, this would have been fantastic for Meowth and Persian, because it would give a solution to Agatha. After all, Dig is a base 100 power move. However, in Generation 3, its base power is only 60, and now all of the ghosts have Levitate, along with most of Koga's Pokemon. So while it's nice to have this move, it's not really excellent. But I will teach it right now in the place of Payday. I don't need to earn more money. Alright, time for Misty. I forgot the Person Berry. Hopefully that doesn't come back to bite me. Secret Power does enough damage to one-shot the Staryu. Starmie's next. I go for Feint Attack against it, which is super effective, and in this case, Meowth gets a critical hit, one-shotting her ace. Alright, that was really easy. The prize for this battle is Water Pulse, and I think this TM is going to be incredibly important for this playthrough. But I'm not going to teach it right away. Instead, I'm going to level Meowth up to 28, where it evolves into its final form, Persian. Now for base stats, we have 65 HP, 115 speed, 70 attack, 60 defense, and 65 special attack and special defense. That gives Persian a base stat total of 440, which is just not very good. I was curious which Pokemon share this base stat total, and then I was really underwhelmed to find Pokemon like Kecleon, Minior, Pelipper, Quillfish among the list. Now, one good thing that comes with this evolution is the fact that our ability changes. While Pickup is cool, we can get extra berries and that kind of thing from it, I would much rather have Persian's ability, which is Limber. It prevents it from being paralyzed, and that status condition is by far the most dangerous one to have in a solo challenge. On the SS hand, I pick up the TM for Rest. I think this will probably be useful later on, but I'm not entirely sure. Then I go up against the rival again. This time around with Secret Power, I can one-shot the Pidgeotto, the Raticate, and the Kadabra. Ivysaur's last. I go for Bite here just in case I can flinch, because I don't think that Secret Power is going to one-shot. Bite does inflict the flinch. As a result, I can use Secret Power to follow up and knock out his ace in 2 hits. With the rival defeated, now it's time for the worst gym leader of them all, Lieutenant Surge. His first Pokemon's Voltorb. In this case though, his entire team is kind of ineffective against Persian just because of its ability Limber. Even if I hit the Pikachu, Static cannot activate, so I will never be paralyzed. The only thing that Persian really has to worry about here is attacking the Raichu with Dig, because then it would set up double team more times in a row. Because of that, I went for Secret Power, trying to be a little bit more offensive. After 1 Super Potion, I knock out the Raichu in 2 more hits and earn myself the 3rd badge. The prize for this victory is a boost to my defense stat, as well as the TM for Shockwave, which again, Persian can learn. Just like Water Pulse, I'm going to save this one for later. I grab the Aerial Ace TM, then inside of Rock Tunnel, I have to go up against Hiker Dudley. Luckily here, Feint Attack does special damage, so I can knock out all of his Pokemon very quickly. I grab the TM for Return. This is going to be Persian's go-to move throughout the late game. I teach it in the place of Bite, and then I enter the Rocket Hideout. Mandatory mention of Intimidate users. They're going to get really frustrating the longer this playthrough goes on. Giovanni's next. I have okay moves against him. Dig is super effective against his rock ground types, although it's not doing that much damage. I have to 2-shot. Kangaskhan's last. Return's going to be a 3-shot, which is a little bit frustrating. Luckily, Giovanni is never really that good in this fight. Unless he spams Tail Whip with his Kangaskhan and then follows up with Mega Punch, that can do a lot of damage, but that's not what happens here. In the department store, I pick up some replacement TMs for Dig and Secret Power, just in case I want to relearn those moves later on. It doesn't always seem like that would be a good idea, but just hold on to that thought for later. I teach Aerial Ace to Persian in the place of Secret Power, and then I head to Erika's gym. Here, you can see that I'm battling some trainers, the ones that give good experience yields. That said, I'm not really going out of my way to gain more experience with Persian. What I was thinking in the moment was that I don't need to do that much optional training, because after the rare candies that I'll use prior to the league, my Persian is probably going to be level 70 by the end of the game, and that will be enough. There's no way that this run could be as bad as Nidoqueen was just a few days ago. Erika, she leads with Victory Bell. In this case, I'm going for Return. It's doing more than half. Her lead just goes for Poison Powder and then Feints. This is not a good status condition, it's just generally quite bad. The Tangela is using Giga Drain, doing okay damage, and by the time it faints I have less than half health. Poison brings me down to 37 hit points. Vileplume takes more than half from return, and then it goes for Giga Drain, but it's not able to heal enough. As a result, on the next turn, I knock it out and Persian survives this battle with 3 hit points. So that fight was unexpectedly close, especially considering that Persian is very over-leveled. Erika's Pokemon range from 24 to 29, and Persian was level 36 for this battle. I'm even more over-leveled for the rival in Pokemon Tower. I get a critical hit and one-shot the Pidgeotto, and then the Gyarados comes in and slows things down with Intimidate. I'm still able to two-shot, but then the Growlithe comes out and again slows things down with a second Intimidate. Whenever I'm playing the game with a normal type Pokemon where all of the starters are technically neutrally effective against my Solomon, it's sometimes difficult to pick which team the rival should have. In a case like this, I do think him choosing the grass starter is the most difficult option for Persian to go up against. The reason is Bulbasaur and Ivysaur have Sleep Powder in the early game, which can really mess you up, even though the Venusaur in the late game is not particularly good. And an additional factor here is that there is the Gyarados and the Growlithe, both of which have Intimidate, and typically normal types are physical attackers. This kind of goes against my normal logic, which is only to use type effectiveness to choose the starter, but if I go with that, then I would just randomly flip a coin and choose a starter, I guess. So it makes sense to go to the next line of logic, which is which one is going to be most difficult. In this case, Ivysaur because it has Sleep Powder. And then the Intimidate stuff is just a secondary byproduct that makes it even more difficult. Luckily I have Aerial Ace against it, which does more than half, but then Sleep Powder does get me. Persian sleeps for quite a bit while it uses Razor Leaf on me. Luckily before Ivysaur gets the knockout, Persian wakes up, uses Aerial Ace one more time, and that's that for the rival. This was another close battle, even though I'm over-leveled. Playing the solo challenge and knowing how Erika and the rival in Pokemon Tower are both usually pretty easy for solo runs, I should have taken this as a signal that was saying Persian needs to train a lot before the late game. Unfortunately, I didn't clue into that. Further up the tower, I grab the Nugget, which normally I don't pick up, but in this case, I want to grab as much money as possible. I'm working towards earning myself the Shadow Ball TM, which is purchasable from the game corner. Luckily for Persian, I'm not going to be skipping all of the optional trainers in the mid-game, although I'm definitely not fighting enough. On Cycling Road, I fight Biker Ruben. He has 2 Wheezing and 1 Coughing. There are actually 2 trainers on Cycling Road that have this team. The other one is Biker Virgil, who is in the original position of the double Wheezing trainer from Generation 1. After that, I fight Biker William, the final guy on the route who is the biker boss in Generation 1. Then in Fuchsia City, I use the Move Tutor to teach Substitute in the place of Feint Attack. I have Aerial Ace to bypass accuracy checks against Koga. And upon completing the Safari Zone, his gym is where I'm headed next. I beat the 1 mandatory trainer and then go up against the Poison type specialist. Coughing's first. Remember, it has Levitate, so I can't use Dig against it. But I can set up with Substitute, so it can't hit me with Toxic or Smokescreen. And Self-Destruct is just gonna whiff if it chooses that. I knock it out, move on to the Muck, and unfortunately here, I'm seduced into using Dig, and it's setting up with Acid Armor. Also, I will note that Return right now has an effective power of 136, whereas Dig has an effective power, when super effective, of 120. So it doesn't make any sense to use Dig. I should just be spamming Return. Anyways, this Muck, as of late, has been causing so many problems, and once again it does. I am not able to knock it out, and as a result, Koga ends up finishing Persian. I tried again, this time using Return right away against the Muck, not going for Dig. This works so much better. I knock it out, move on to the Coughing, which breaks my Substitute, but then it goes for Self-Destruct right after I set up my defenses again. This isn't the best scenario though, because without a Substitute in place, I'm not going to be able to use another one against the final Wheezing. And then I made a misclick choosing Substitute, so Wheezing gets me anyways. I still would have lost there unless I got a critical hit. That would have been the only way to win in this position. Next, I'm going to head to Sylph and do a little bit of training. Again, not enough. This brings Persian up to level 46, and then I take on the rival. With Substitute, I can block the Pidgeot's Feather Dance and then knock it out over 2 turns. Also, having a Substitute means I will block Intimidate from the Gyarados. It's able to break my defenses though, so Growlithe's Intimidate still works. I knock it out, Return is still one-shotting the Alakazam, and I move on to Venusaur. Here's the thing, I can play around its status conditions by setting up with Substitute. By this point in the run, the Grass Ace is definitely the weakest of the 3 aces. I think Blastoise is second and Charizard is by far the best. But each one of them has their quirks, like Charizard loves to spam Scary Face, which is absolutely useless when you have a Substitute in place. With it, I block Venusaur's status conditions and knock it out over 3 turns. This is where we're going to come back to the TM that I mentioned earlier on, Water Pulse. I'm going to teach it in the place of Aerial Ace because I want super effective damage against rock types and ground types. I use it to steamroll this rocket and then I go up against Giovanni. Unfortunately for me, I just barely don't one-shot the Nidorino, and it triggers Poison Point, so I have the status condition from the beginning of the battle. Also, Nidoqueen does go down to 2 hits, but it does a lot of damage in the process using Body Slam. Then, I can't one-shot the Kangaskhan, so I lose even more health. I only have 6 hit points left over, and the turn order in Generation 3 is that the enemy sends out their Pokemon at the end of the turn before poison damage is calculated, so Persian faints. It's really embarrassing to lose to Giovanni. I have to battle the one random rocket again before coming back and fighting him for a second time. This time though, Poison Point doesn't activate on the Nidorino. It does on the Nidoqueen though, but this is later into the battle, giving Persian enough time to knock out the Kangaskhan with decent health, and then finish the Rhyhorn with a single Water Pulse. This is why this move is better for this battle over something like Dig, which would have taken 2 turns. Sabrina's next. This one is really easy because I'm a strong physical attacker. Well, strong is maybe a little bit overly ambitious for Persian. It does only have base 70 attack. During this fight I have the chance to learn Slash, and this makes me a little bit sad because this was my go-to move in Generation 1. But today I'm not going to learn it. Return is what I have to rely on. I one-shot the Alakazam, and that's that for the Psychic type specialist. With her defeated, I can't go to Blaine next because I need to be able to use Surf outside of battle. To do that, I have to beat Koga, so let's go back to him. Persian is a significantly higher level now. Even when the Muck goes for turn 1 Acid Armor, I just knock it out with 2 returns. I still have my Substitute in place for Coughing, which I one-shot, so I have my defense for the Wheezing, meaning even if it uses Self-Destruct, I won't lose. This battle is trivial now. On my way to Cinnabar Island, I'm experimenting with fighting some optional trainers here, like Swimmer Spencer, who has a Seadra and a Tentacruel. I've also fought him in some yellow runs as of late, only when I need a lot of experience with a Pokemon like Growlithe. So you can see that I'm picking up some optional trainers with Persian. Still, not as many as I think I should have. But the rival wasn't that challenging, Sabrina wasn't that challenging, so right now the game is not sending me strong signals that I need to be doing more training. And that's usually how I play these challenges now. If I'm just steamrolling everything, I'm not going to do optional training. Why would I? That'll just slow the Pokemon's results down. So let's keep going. Next is Blaine. His team's really annoying. You can't avoid Intimidate from Growlithe even if you have Substitute. That said, if I take multiple Intimidates, I can still just use Water Pulse for super effective damage. And while it won't be good as a maximum damage return with full attack, it'll still be pretty good since after 1 Intimidate, Persian's special attack is higher than its physical attack. Plus Water Pulse has a 20% upside to confuse the opponent. As of late with Blaine, I've been finding that setting up Substitute doesn't make a lot of sense because with most Pokemon he can break it fairly quickly. Then you're just losing health before the Arcanine comes in. In this case, my strategy is spam return, which is the wrong choice. I think I should be going for Water Pulse here, make it to the Arcanine without setting up Substitute, and then start using Water Pulse because it's hit me with an Intimidate. Unfortunately, I am not able to 2-shot with the Water type move, and Arcanine gets me with Fire Blasts. I make it back to the Arcanine, this time in much better condition. I'm at full health. Then Water Pulse confuses, Arcanine hits itself. Blaine has a full heal, which I didn't know he had. He uses this to heal the status condition instead of attacking, and my second Water Pulse does enough damage to knock out after the confusion damage. So that's another relatively easy gym leader. Inside the Viridian City Gym, Water Pulse is really helpful against people like Cool Trainer Warren, who very often cause issues. And in this case, just like Giovanni and Sylph, he does, because of Poison Point, one of the most annoying abilities in the game. Persian just barely scrapes out a win here with 20 hit points. Okay, time for the final gym leader, Giovanni. He's got 2 Rhyhorns. We're going to one-shot both of them using Water Pulse. I'm also going to use Water Pulse on the Nidoqueen and the Nidoking just for the confusion effect and also the ability to avoid Poison Point. I don't want to deal with a status condition here. By the way, I've been playing a lot of Red on stream this year on the channel. I'm trying to beat the game with every single species in 2025. One thing I always mention when I'm fighting Giovanni in those games is the fact that both the Nidoqueen and the Nidoking have a terrible moveset, including the move Poison Sting. In Fire Red, he still has Poison Sting on these 2 Pokemon. I hope that that's that's an Easter egg for Generation 1, because why? These two Pokemon should have something else, like Blizzard, maybe even Sludge Bomb. I know it's a post-game TM, but we should give it to Giovanni. His team's pretty trash anyways. Persian has no problems against him. Before facing the rival on Route 22, I head back to Celadon City. I'm going to the game corner so that I can purchase myself 4,500 coins and then get Shadow Ball. This is going to be my solution for Agatha. I teach it in the place of Dig prior to facing the rival. Pidgeot is first, Substitute to avoid Feather Dance, then Return to knock it out over 2 turns. Rhyhorn is a one-shot with Water Pulse. I block Intimidate from Gyarados and use Return to 2-shot. It just sets up Rain Dance, lowering the damage that the Growlithe would deal, which is perfect. Water Pulse gets a one-shot here, boosted by the rain. I love it when the rival creates great synergies for my Pokemon. Shadow Ball is super effective against the Alakazam, easily finishing it in 1 hit, and once again the Venusaur is going to take multiple turns to knock out. It does break my Substitute, but it's a little bit too late. The rival once again was straightforward. During Victory Road I fought some optional trainers. While I was doing that I made a small voice note and I just said I wanted to make sure that I leveled up enough so that Persian wouldn't get stuck like Nidoqueen did. Oh, the irony, because the Elite Four is just around the corner, and believe me, Persian has not leveled enough. Coming out of Victory Road, it's level 58, and here I use all of my rare candies, boosting it up to level 68 prior to taking on Lorelei. Dugong's first. I know that it's going to set up Hail, so it's not really that much of a threat provided I can 2-shot with Return, and Persian can easily. Then on the Cloyster, I have time to set up Substitute because its moveset is terrible at breaking my defense. After that, I just have to take my time, knocking it out with Return, which takes 3 hits. She also uses a full restore, so it takes a total of 5. It also uses Dive, but it doesn't break my Substitute because it's not very offensive. Slowbro's next, and by this point in the battle, I have taken so much chip damage from Hail that Persian's health is not looking great. Slowbro survives a Shadow Ball, then uses Surf, breaking my Substitute, and I knock it out on the next turn. But I don't have another defense, so I'm going to have to knock out the Lapras and the Jinx, and that's just not going to happen. Look at how much damage Shadow Ball does to the Lapras. Like, I should have used Return, but still, it would have done maybe half. Like, I'm going to 2-shot the Lapras in the best possible case at the current level. In the next battle, I took a different approach, which is trying to minimize Hail damage. By doing this, I'm just going to spam Return and knock out her first 2 Pokemon without setting up my defense. This gets me to the Slowbro with green health, and if I know anything about Generation 2, AI, and onwards, the Pokemon like to set up if you have more health than they can KO you from. So in this case, Slowbro chooses Amnesia, giving me the 2-shot with Shadow Ball, so I take no damage here. Next, she sends in Lapras. Shadow Ball turn 1. The reason I'm doing this is so that if I 3-hit, she won't use a healing item. Now I can use Return. It takes Lapras down to red health. This looks like it's full restore range. Lapras chooses Surf. Persian survives with 2 hit points. And because the Lapras is holding a Citrus Berry, it heals out of full restore range, and my next Return knocks it out. All that's left is Jinx. It's physically frail. I use Return, and Persian knocks it out. That battle was so close. I'm honestly really proud of myself for how I played that fight, but after it, I distinctly remember being very worried about the remaining league members. Bruno is next, and he has a type advantage over Persian. Luckily, Water Pulse is going to give me 1-shots on both of the Onix. I have to use Return for the Hitmonchan and the Hitmonlee. The first of these survives, uses Rock Tomb, and lowers Persian's speed, but it is so outrageously fast that it's still going to move first against all of his Pokemon. He uses a healing item, and then I 2-shot from there. Hitmonlee's next. Return is able to 1-shot it, so I've made it to his Machamp. Now, how much damage is Return gonna do? Much more than half. Machamp chooses Cross Chop, in this case missing, and with that, Persian gets a lucky victory. Okay, so the summary so far: really close battle against Lorelei, really lucky battle against Bruno. How is Agatha gonna be? Well, the answer is really easy. Shadow Ball 1-shots the initial Gengar. The Golbat does survive, but it just goes for Air Cutter, doing almost no damage. I take my time here when she's using a healing item to set up a Substitute and then knock it out. This is so I can block the Intimidate from the following Arbok, which does take 2 turns to go down, and it breaks my Substitute in the process. But now I have Shadow Ball. It's physical in Generation 3. I crit the final Gengar, easily 1-shotting, and that leaves only the Haunter, which also goes down to 1 critical hit. This feels like Generation 1 Persian. It's refreshing. Agatha was actually easy, but Lance is not going to be. His lead is the intimidating Gyarados. I get lucky here with a 2-shot on it because I crit with Return. Otherwise, it's going to be a 3-hit. Aerodactyl's next. It has decent special defense, but I still think using Water Water Pulse here makes the most sense. Unfortunately, I take a little bit of damage in the process, then Return is doing about a third to his Ace Dragonite. It sets up Safeguard, giving me time, which is nice, but then it crits with Outrage, knocking Persian out. Now, you're going to ask me about the TM I mentioned before, Shockwave. Why am I not using it at this point in the run? Well, I'm in a bit of a pickle, at least in my current format. Right now my moveset is Return, Substitute, I've taught Rest in the place of Water Pulse, and then I have Shadow Ball. But if I've given up Water Pulse, I won't be able to get it back later for the second League attempt, which makes me really scared about Bruno's 2 Steelix. I can't forget either Return or Substitute and get those back either later into the playthrough, and I need to hang on to Shadow Ball for the second attempt at Agatha. This is a moment where I'm having to make choices based on 2 outcomes. Number 1, the clock in time that I'm going to get after the first champion, and number 2, the post-game section of the league. In this case, I am always going to prioritize clocking in against the first champion, since that's the primary method for ranking Pokemon in this initial playthrough. That is why I've given up Water Pulse. If I was only stopping the timer after the second league attempt, then I would have kept Water Pulse, because giving it up now just doesn't make sense. I think I would black out here with Persian, grind up like 10 more levels, and then come back in and try and beat Lance more easily, keeping Water Pulse on my set. With Rest, I can make the fights longer, but I don't necessarily make them easier. It is possible to squeeze through with a victory, but I lose multiple times trying this strategy. By the time I get in position to defeat Lance, I have chosen a different option for which move to delete. I have kept Water Pulse, and I'm now deleting Substitute using Rest as my defensive move. I personally don't really like this, but it does provide a path for me to defeat Lance, because if I need more health later on, I can heal up on the Dragonite, it might hit itself with Outrage, and then I can knock it out. Also, if I make it by the Dragonite and I have very low health, then if I'm unsure that I'll one-shot the Dragonairs, and I wasn't sure, I can use Rest to heal, a Chesto Berry to wake up right away, and then Return to knock out both of these final 2 dragons. They're easy to clean up, and with that, Persian has made it to the champion. If you're not familiar with Fire Red solo challenges, you might be wondering why I was holding on to Substitute so dearly. Well, look at what can happen against the champion right away when you don't have it. You can't block Feather Dance, meaning my attack gets lowered by 2 stages, and I also can't block the Pidgeot's use of Sand Attack, so my accuracy could be impacted too. Essentially, if the Pidgeot chooses Feather Dance or Sand Attack on the first turn of battle, I am just going to reset right away because I don't think I'll be able to beat the rest of his team members. This causes not 1, not 2, but 3 fast resets. Also, now that I've given up Substitute, I have no way to block Intimidate from 2 of the champion's Pokemon. Luckily, the team order here is in the order that it appears on the right hand side of the screen. This is because Persian's a normal type and he has no fighting type moves. Alakazam is second, I can one-shot it. Rhydon is third, I can one-shot it because I kept Water Pulse, and then Gyarados comes in, lowering my attack. I did decide to play this fight out with -1 accuracy, and because of it I end up losing. But it takes even longer. I make it to the Arcanine, Water Pulse doesn't 2-hit, and then it finishes me. In this fight I got lucky because the Gyarados was missing attacks with Hydro Pump, but when it doesn't do this, then Persian takes a lot of damage prior to the Arcanine, meaning I have to use Rest against it, which isn't going to work because Flamethrower is doing so much damage. There's a solution here, teaching Shockwave in the place of Shadow Ball. For the League rematches, I guess I'll just have to buy another copy of that TM, which is quite inconvenient. This lets me knock out the Gyarados very quickly, but it's still not a one-hit. I could have purchased Thunderbolt, but I would have had to forego Shadow Ball, and having the Ghost type move I think has a little bit more utility. It did trivialize Agatha. With the Electric type move, I knock the Gyarados out, then I get lucky on the Arcanine, knocking it out in only 2 turns because it hit itself in confusion. So for the first time, Persian arrives at the Venusaur. Unfortunately for me, it has Sunny Day and Synthesis. I remember my heart was beating so quickly here, I was just hoping that it would run out of Sunny Days, maybe use a Growth when it shouldn't, and then get knocked out by Return, but it's just not taking enough damage, and eventually it lands a Solar Beam, which crits, and Persian faints. Unfortunately, I'm stuck against the champion for quite a while. I tried some more of the Shadow Ball strategy, but Shockwave is just better here. Getting by the Arcanine is what really requires luck here. I need to be able to 2-shot it, and to do that I can either crit with 1 turn of Water Pulse or it can damage itself with Confusion. In this case, I get the critical hit. That lets me move on to the Venusaur. I use Rest and a Lumberry to heal on the first turn, and then I have to just cross my fingers and hope that Return is going to to do it. This is not where I want to be. Also though, blacking out doesn't really help me, because if I black out, then my moveset is going to be fundamentally different, and I think worse, for all of the league members that are prior to the champion. So I was really locked in here, just trying to win with luck. And in this case I do. I crit the Venusaur and it goes down to only 2 returns. Persian clocks in with an underwhelming first playthrough result of 1 hour 26 minutes and 44 seconds, with 37 faults, consisting of 23 resets and 14 blackouts. It finished the game at level 71 with a game time of 4 hours and 37 minutes. Okay, time for the independently timed post-game section. I spent extra time before the league again, picking up the Silk Scarf. This is an item that takes a lot of time to get, but I think it's worth it for Persian since it didn't do well the first time through the league. And I'm glad I got every little boost that I could, because when I come back to face Lorelei, she just beats me over and over and over again. I take a total of 5 blackouts here before I finally beat her. Because I held on to Water Pulse, Bruno's Steelixes aren't too bad, they're both 2 shots. I crit the Hitmonchan, knocking it out in a single turn with return. Then I also crit the Machamp, and I don't need to crit the Hitmonlee, but it is also a 1-hit, so I bypass all of his fighting type moves. His last Steelix comes out, and then I crit this one. Again, Persian is feeling like it's regained its Generation 1 form. Now I went back and I purchased myself a second Shadow Ball TM with all of the money that I earned in the post game. I have to choose which move to give up. Here I think it makes the most sense to get rid of Water Pulse, although that means I'm not going to have great damage against the champion's Tyranitar. Agatha is not as easy as she was the first time around. She's actually quite brutal now. Shadow Ball isn't able to one-hit even the first Gengar. It puts me to sleep and then everything just spirals out of control and I take a quick reset to the Crobat. The next fight's a lot better, but again without Substitute I can't block the Arbok's Intimidate, so I get stuck in a healing loop here which takes a long time and ends up in a loss for Persian. Surprisingly for once the Arbok is actually putting in meaningful work against my Pokemon. It has Sludge Bomb and Earthquake, so it can actually do a decent amount of damage during this battle. Ideally what I want to do is knock out the Arbok in 2 hits and take no damage from it. This is the scenario that transpires during my 4th battle against Agatha. This means I make it to the final Gengar for the first time. Shadow Ball does half, it uses Thunderbolt, Persian survives, and I knock it out with red health. So I use Rest to heal, Persian's Chesto Berry wakes it up, and then I can knock out the Misdreavus. So I pull through Agatha, but still, Persian's post-game time is already not very good. It's just tipped over 25 minutes. I have 4 more rare candies left over, so I'm going to use those now to bring Persian up from level 79 to 83. Lance is always harder the second time around, at least he isn't as bad as he is in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I get a critical hit against the Gyarados using Shockwave, that knocks it out in 1 turn. But ordinarily, this is going to be a 2-hit. Then Kingdra comes in, and it takes a long time to knock out, setting up with Dragon Dance. Eventually, with its raised attack stat, it attacks with Hyper Beam and does so much damage, but Persian hangs on. Unfortunately for Persian, while I am able to manage the next Dragonite, the Aerodactyl is just too tough. It takes less than half damage from Shockwave, and it's doing a lot with its Earthquakes. One ends up being a crit, and that's that. Against Gyarados, I tried going for Shadow Ball on turn 1 and then Shockwave on turn 2 to avoid a healing item, but Shockwave just barely doesn't have enough damage, so I decided to quickly reset. Instead, I'll just spam Shockwave and burn one of his full restores here on his first Pokemon. After that, I slowly knock out the Kingdra. In this case, I get lucky because he doesn't heal it, so it never attacks. I knock out the following Dragonite, move on to the Aerodactyl, and when it doesn't get a critical hit, I'm able to finish it slowly using many Shockwaves. Final Dragonite time. It's going for Outrage. I can outlast it using Rest and the leftovers. Eventually, it's going to hit itself in Confusion, provided it doesn't get a critical hit along the way. It doesn't, it goes for Hyper Beam. I attack with Return, Persian brings it down to a sliver of health, and Dragonite knocks itself out. So the post game has been really bumpy. We've almost been here for 30 minutes. But the hardest trainer of them all for Persian to defeat is the champion. Heracross, a fighting type, is first. This is really bad. It does like to use Rock Tomb, but I'll still be faster than all of his Pokemon, even the Alakazam, after getting hit by one of these. Another lucky factor is that the only fighting type move Heracross has is Counter, which is not very good, and using Return, I am able to 2-shot. Alakazam's next, and Persian easily 1-hits. But then Tyranitar comes in. It whips up a Sandstorm, and this is going to counter out all the healing that I get from leftovers throughout the rest of the battle. None of my moves really make sense to attack this thing. Return has the highest effective power, lower, but if I use Shadow Ball, I could potentially drop the Tyranitar's special defense. Now, Shadow Ball is a physical move, so it's not going to get more damage every time I attack with it, but then I could potentially start using Shockwave for a little bit more damage per turn. This fight really makes me wish that Water Pulse was a purchasable TM in Generation 3. If I could get one more of these to solve the Tyranitar, it would be really convenient. Unfortunately, I just get stuck healing myself, and eventually the Tyranitar knocks Persian out, because it is going to start resorting to Crunch at some point, which will lower my special defense, and then Tyranitar will do more and more damage. I figured out what I needed to do right away to get by the Tyranitar. I need to teach Attract in the place of Shadow Ball, then 50% of the time it's not going to be attacking me, and hopefully I can then get lucky. Still, even with Attract, the odds of this working are not very good, because the champion's going to use healing items to save the Tyranitar over and over again. I have to use Rest, and the longer the fight goes, the more likely it is that he's going to get a critical hit. I've been using Attract a lot more lately in my solo challenges, and in a lot of cases it really does solve problems quickly, but in this case it doesn't. I had 3 very long battles against Tyranitar until finally I'm able to knock it out. Gyarados is next. Again, I can't block Intimidate. This is so frustrating. However, I can use Attract against all of his remaining Pokemon to give myself a better chance. Thing is, I just get stuck healing with the Gyarados dealing damage to me, and I never felt comfortable moving on from it with green health, because the Arcanine and the Venusaur were both problematic previously. Eventually things line up, I have full health, I knock the Gyarados out, and Arcanine comes in. Turn 1, Attract. It goes for Overheat, doing massive damage. I have to heal with Rest. It goes for another Overheat, this time getting a critical hit in Persian Faints. I was so discouraged when this happened. Like, I don't really have any other good options. My Persian's level 83. Grinding on wild Pokemon isn't going to make much sense. I would have to fight the league over and over again to level up. Maybe it's going to do this at like level 90, but even then it doesn't seem like it's going to be that much easier. My damage ranges are just so bad against the Tyranitar, and Persian doesn't really have any options against it. I dabbled around with some dig strategies, maybe with Attract. Even though the Tyranitar has Earthquake, it will not attack me on the turn that I'm underground, and then I can do more damage to it in one turn. The problem with this strategy is it's just not consistent. I get reset after reset after reset. Eventually though, I revert back to the other strategy, and I do beat the Tyranitar again for a second time using Attract. I make it through the Gyarados as I did before, so how's Arcanine going to be this time? Well, Overheat inflicts massive damage. The thing is, it can't keep doing that because it's lowering its special attack. So if I just rest here enough, I think I should be able to pull through. Also, the Sandstorm that Tyranitar established is actually a benefit to me here, because as I'm using Rest, the Arcanine is taking chip damage every turn. Occasionally I wake up and I attack it because of Attract, and then finally I knock it out and I have full health for the Venusaur. This is looking good. I use Attract. This is hopefully going to mess up its attacks with Solar Beam, and I'm really hoping that it doesn't go for Sunny Day first, but it does. However, Return is doing decent damage here, even though my attack stat has been lowered by 2 stages. Attract comes through for me, Venusaur isn't able to attack, and with that, the champion is finally defeated. The post-game took Persian 52 minutes and 41 seconds. I had a total of 25 faults, consisting of 20 resets and 5 blackouts. Persian finished this section of the game at level 84 with a cumulative game time of 6 hours and 32 minutes. Tier list time. If you support me on YouTube memberships or through Patreon, thank you so much for the direct support. You allow me to accomplish things like ranking all the Pokemon in tier lists like this. For the post game, up until now, Nidoqueen has got the worst result, with a time of 46 minutes and 1 second. Unfortunately today, the normal type Persian has set a new standard of bad. It's going to be the only Pokemon ranked in the Lieutenant Surge tier. Things are better for it though if we switch over to the main tier list. Interestingly enough, it has a very similar base stat total to both Arbok and Sandslash, beating both of them, Arbok by a decent amount and Sandslash just by a little bit, earning itself the third to last spot in the C tier. So Persian is a Pokemon that didn't age very well, going from Generation 1 into all future games. If you want to see 2 other Pokemon that didn't age very well, go and check out Sandslash and Nidoqueen and their playthroughs in Fire Red. It's kind of the same story for both of them. Thanks so much for watching. If you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you next time.